Uh-oh. Okay, stream is working, but it looks like the CPU usage and utilization is a little low. So, welcome to Catalyzer number 3. This is going to be about Milo Yiannopoulos. We all know and love Milo, right? Well, he is a bit of an acquired taste, I will tell you that right now. But he's doing a very important service for those people that do believe in free speech. And it doesn't really matter if you agree with his premises or not, because ultimately what matters is that we that didn't work. Interesting. Well, now I forget I'm in live wrong mode here. See what I can do to myself? Yeah. Anyways, I was playing around with this just before I started, and it gets you in trouble when you're trying to do things last minute. I didn't really have a lot of time to work on preparing for the show. I was doing more of the intellectual stuff and preparing, but I wasn't able to actually do much. But I did do one thing I want to do. This is, if you've never seen Milo, this is, I think he's been doing a lot of commercials, and he's back on the scene. And I do have links to his recent presentation, and I linked to the video that this movie came from. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to transition to that, and if everything works correctly, you're going to get to see his commercial, and then I will go from there. Hopefully everything works. Okay, I should be back. Audio, everything should be working. Now that is Milo. He calls himself a shock jock, or God, there's another word I was going to use, and that totally blew my mind just when I needed it. Provocateur. That's the word I was looking for, and he often uses that term. But here's the thing that we're trying to do. If you want the freedom of speech back, we need people to go out there and press the limits and showing what is okay, where are the limits, right? And why they're okay. Now he has a sensibility of understanding what he's doing. Yes, it's showmanship. Yes, it's all the things that you immediately react to. But the part of it is to send a message of, I also have a real message here, and I'm also fighting a specific thing. And whether you agree with his techniques or not, I personally agree with him because I think it helps build the intellectual immune system, meaning it helps you hear messages that are hard to hear because they're outside of your preview. He makes them interesting enough so you can actually palate hearing some of the things you really don't want to hear. And we tend to avoid ideas that don't agree with our ideas, so there's that cognitive dissonance. And so he does do things in a playful way, and he does them in sort of an extreme to sort of let you understand the idea and how it's different from where you might be. Now, for example, we don't often do fat shaming. And it may not be a good thing to do, but it shouldn't be something you can't do. That there's some cultural says that's always the wrong thing to do. It may depend on the specific person and the context that that's being done in, and in the nature that it's being done in. We need to be able to joke about problems that individuals have and deal with them. And not being able to talk about them, joke about them, makes them harder to actually deal with, because you don't actually know where people stand. We need to know where people stand, how they feel about things. And one reason I refer back to Sam Harris's book Lying often is in one of the scenes in there he makes the reference to a friend ask him, do you think I'm too fat? And his basic answer was, yeah, I think you're too fat. You could lose about 20 pounds. Now, his friend felt like that helped him. It's like, okay, this is reality. This is what other people are seeing. I'm kind of seeing it, but I kind of need someone to help me see it for myself. And we think we're being a friend by not telling them that this is what's happening. So I encourage you to give Milo a chance to be extreme here. He's going to draw a lot of fire, so he is a lightning rod for free speech, and we'll see what he does. He says if you go into his the link I have below, I'm not going to try to play it. That would be a little hard for me to do. But the May 5th event, he talks about what he has. Apparently he has $12 million to spend. I don't know the strings attached to it or nothing like that, but he wants to start a media company, and so we'll see what he does. And he's going to sue Simon & Schuster, and he's going to shame him for the next year. I wonder what his lawyers are going to say with him shaming the company at the same time that he's suing them. Lawyers are a little weird that way. They want you to shut the fuck up. So that will be interesting to see how that pans out. So now there was another thing that Milo does, and why I put Sjew. Sjew was something a YouTuber, Noel Plum 99, something like that. I should probably link that in there too. But he ran into someone calling him an S-Jew, and he didn't know what it meant, right? So he's like, well, okay, what the hell does this mean? I'm just an S-Jew. Now, sometimes I think the big boy pants are when you go, okay, maybe I am an S-Jew. And one of the comment I left for him on that was, what if what they meant by being a Jew, by being an S-Jew, is that you were supportive of interest rate, for example. And if I'm a supporter of the concept of interest rate, and I believe it's a good concept, then by definition I would then be an S-Jew because I support a Jewish concept. Because back in the days, Jews were the first really to invent the idea of interest. And whether you know it or not, interest is an extremely important concept that has really made capitalism work. It puts money back to work. If you don't have interest in the economy, it really stagnates the economy. Interest is really important to motivate productivity. It not only motivates the person who loaned the money, it motivates the person who received the loan to pay the loan back. So both parties are motivated to finish the transaction and keep being productive. So when people just say interest is bad, and that's an interesting thing about someone was saying that the value of Sharia law was one of these, the interest, they don't believe in interest. And I would say that's a good example of how backwards and narrow-minded thinking they have, because that's, in my way of thinking, interest is a really good thing. Now you can overdo it, there can be too much, it can stagnate economy the opposite way. But I definitely believe that interest is a part of a healthy economy. And I don't know, I don't think you can do it without it. Now I know some libertarians have some interesting views on interest, and I think they're absolutely wrong. You need interest. It's an incentivizer. So and that's economic theory. And if you have a way of proving to me that that's not necessary, I'd be very interested. But I don't see how you're going to incentivize a system without interest. So that's just something to keep in mind. When you think about someone comes up with a new term, sometimes you embrace the term, or you can conscript it for your own uses. And the philosophy is based on yes and. And I am using yes and for my own purposes, for demonstrating positive, constructive dialogue. Can you take what someone says and then say yes and? Now, sometimes you may want to take it to a logical absurdity, just to see how much you can push the idea. I was trying to think if there was a example of putting men into concentration camps, and then just because that's where men should belong. And there was a particular feminist that said this. And actually, I'm trying to remember, because I know Milo actually had a conversation with her. And her comment was, it's just a joke. I was just making a joke. Now, whether it was a joke or not, but it would be something you'd take. She was taking the extreme. Well, we'll just put them in concentration camps. We'll get rid of them. And in some ways, it reflects a feminist ideology of, do men not belong in society? They have borne a lot of sweat and tears in society, and we're just going to kick them out because they're annoying now. They've built a society. They've built themselves out of their society. And that's the funny thing about if you get into men's issues and you start looking at just the dynamics, just the fundamentals of sacrifice. My favorite statistic is 90%, and I think it's a little more, very much in the 90 percentile, of workplace deaths are men. Okay, that just means the sacrifice to the economy is in male blood. And you just can't overlook, how is that not a sacrifice? How is that not a contribution to the society? You walk down a street. How did that street get there? Houses. Who's building the houses? Who's sacrificing truck drivers? Who's getting the products there? Sure, women could do it, but they don't. And you want the cushy jobs, right? It's like, okay, well, where are the women mechanics? Where are the women things? Let's look at this in a balanced equation. Okay, and these are things we're not allowed to talk about because, now you're just picking on women. And this is why we need Milo to pick on and look at, to make people justify their positions. Now, Milo has to justify his positions too. And I don't agree with him on regressive tax. I think regressive tax is regressive. It's not a particularly great idea. Now, if you don't know what a regressive tax is, sales taxes are regressive because it hurts the poor people more than it does the rich people. Now, he says, well, that disincentivizes them to become rich. Here's a problem with that theory. We are assuming that everyone's not the same. We're assuming the abilities of individuals are different, like men and women are different. Individually, people are different. And our society selects for a certain group of people. It doesn't select for all people. It doesn't make Down syndrome people suddenly as valuable as Einstein's in society, right? I think Down syndrome people offer a wonderful character of a person in society. And I don't necessarily think punishing them with a higher tax incentivizes them to be better people. It just makes their life harder, and it doesn't allow them to be as creative as they could be, because we constantly punish them with a higher tax. That's kind of how my argument would go against it. But just so you know, there you can argue specific cases, especially with Milo. And the fat shame is another thing that I say may work for some people, but you really need to take it by a case-by-case basis. It shouldn't be disallowed, but it shouldn't be assumed that it's going to work. Fat shaming, that is. So I think it's important that when we say we disagree with someone, and I was thinking about this before I was going to do this broadcast, I think it's important that we know what we disagree with and actually find specific points we do disagree with, and make sure we state them so someone can say, well, I know he disagrees with him, but what's a good example of what he disagrees with him on? Okay. I'm someone that thinks eventually we're going to need something called a basic income, or because of automation. I just think it's a fact. I've looked at the data, and I've talked to some of the people that actually are looking at the data. The author of the book, it skips my economic singularity, I think he calls it. And in the future, we have to look at how everything's coming together. And I think this is where men gets impacted a lot more than women, because the workplace is radically changing. It's becoming more feminized. And that's neither here nor there, but it just is sort of a reality. It's becoming safer, right? And it's allowing more women to move into the workplace, and jobs are becoming less manual and more it's based on other soft skills. A soft skills, okay, yeah. I'll just call them soft skills and on intellectual ability. So it's not a manual labor market anymore. And this is going to make it harder for manual labor to stay in there. But as it stands right now, just for people to know, if you are a man and you are starting out, manual labor work is still a very productive thing. I've looked very closely at welding, but they are more dangerous. There's no question that there's jobs that pay well, but they do come with danger. I mean, welding's an example. For the most part, it's probably fairly safe, but it's still dangerous. It's hard on your health. I was recently talking to a construction worker, and we were talking about just being stupid working construction. It's like lifting things you shouldn't be lifting. You need to use a dolly, you need to do things because you're going to screw your knees up, or you're going to screw your shoulders up. Or you're going to. There's a lot of men that I've talked to that have just absolutely wrecked their shoulders, wrecked their knees because of working in industry. So that's kind of something to keep in mind. Staying healthy, especially if you're going to be working in that kind of work for a long period of time. There's plenty of money to be made because we still want things built, and not a lot of women want to do those jobs because they're manual labor jobs. So you're not going to have any competition from those guys. That's it is just one of my things. I didn't really mean to go into that, but a lot of things that Milo talks about will be related to the plight of men, and he does that because we assume the problems that exist in the world are feministic problems, and we've been led to believe this. There are no male-related problems, and men, as a general rule, don't like to complain. I mean, you can look at men aren't the first to file for divorce. Men aren't the first to sue somebody. I won't say that's always true. But I mean, there are, and I don't know about suing in general. That's kind of a weird thing. And the history is really important to understand how things got where they got and why they got where they got. So I think Milo does do, if you haven't heard his spiel, it's always good to hear what he has to say. I think he's right in terms of as a and he likes to pick on transgenders. So if you're not aware of that, you should be aware that he likes to pick on transgenders. And one of the reasons he kind of does that is probably the most alarming thing about transgender surgery is that suicide rate is extremely high under people that identify as transgender. Now I say identify because whether they have an operation or not, they identify as being in the wrong body. So they have an identity crisis of some kind. So some people have surgery, and some people actually say, "Oh, I think it helped," and I think about it's about 55 to 60% say it helped. The other 45 say, "Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wish I hadn't done it." So there's actually a regret for the people that actually have transitional surgery. They actually regret having done the surgery, which is pretty amazing. Not only that, is it doesn't decrease the likelihood that they commit suicide. So it's not helping them in a demonstrable way. I mean, one thing we'd want to be working on, we're looking at the suicide rate, and I would agree that's an absolutely best statistic to look at, and to say, okay, is the person are they not committing suicide? Okay, and if they are at the same rates, whether they have the surgery or not, then we're not addressing the issue. There's other things going on here. And because of political correctness, we're not actually addressing those issues. We're just simply saying, well, that's what they want. Well, okay, some people like drugs, but it's probably not good for them. You know, just saying, oh, well, you can take drugs. You say, are there consequences? I mean, if we care about someone, and that's what it comes to. I mean, if you don't care about the person, yeah, let them do what the hell they want to do. But if you actually care about people and you want to help them, do you want to pay for something that isn't going to help them and they're just going to end up killing themselves anyways? Or there's a high percentage chance that they're just going to kill themselves anyways. So yeah, he's very hard against just simply transitioning people willy-nilly, because basically at this point, if we're not willing to discuss the fact that this isn't helping or that we have a high failure rate, it needs to be really understood. And I think a lot of people in the trans community, whatever we mean by community, people that have had transition surgery, that I do feel that it was the right thing to do for them. I mean, I think they're concerned that many people are doing it for the wrong reasons, or they don't understand, or they're not actually dealing with underlying psychological issues. No, I mean, in principle, if someone just simply wants to be a different person, and I mean, if we allow cosmetic surgery, you know, it's just an extension of cosmetic surgery in a sense. So, I mean, in principle, I don't have a problem with it. But in practice, if it's not accomplishing a goal, why would you be so adamant that it's the right thing to do? Now, with the person, now I'm going to use my own personal experience with learning disability. And the reason I'm doing that is when people use the term, what does it mean? Is it a disability or is it a different ability, right? And there's a book called, and I've mentioned it before, called The Dyslexic Advantage, where they studied just the advantages of dyslexic people in terms of being able to see things in a different way. And so they looked at different types of organization of information. Now, it would be interesting to talk to intelligence researchers to just sort of say, there's some research on it. I'd have to reread the credentials of who they did, but it seemed like a well-received book, and it didn't get bad review. But again, is it politically correct book just because it would be a nice thing to say, oh, you're just differently intelligent? So it's something that I've sort of dealt with, you know. It seems like it might be a different type of intelligence. I can kind of imagine how it could be. But because it's not well understood, and because we don't study it from a perspective of what's actually the problem, um, you don't just simply want to think you understand something, because it is, well, you get a really weird score on an IQ test. And if you don't know how they diagnose learning disabilities, is because on the bell curve, everyone should fit in a normal distribution, and one intelligence should be highly correlated to another. So even one standard deviation, like from your math skills to your verbal skills, is considered a lot. Now, when you get to 2 and 3 standard deviations, that's considered extreme, that's considered unusual. And at that point, they'll probably diagnose you with a learning disability. Or there's some weird factor, and they want to do another test to see what happened there. But then it puts you in a new category. You're sort of like on your own. What are we testing? We're testing intelligence in general, but what is intelligence? And now they talk about what they call G. It's very highly correlated with intelligence. Okay, these are factors that are highly correlated. Jordan Peterson will tell you, like, an SAT score is an IQ test of a type, and he's correct. They're highly correlated together. In fact, they compare the two, and they like to see them correlate nicely. But when it comes to learning disabilities, you kind of have to throw everything out, because something else is going on. Because it seems to be, intelligence still seems to be there. They still seem to be able to function at a really high capacity in one area, but a low capacity in another area. Like there's something hampering their thinking process. A part of intelligence is speed. So a part of the what you're measuring in intelligence is just how fast you can do something. So when I was taking tests, oftentimes I could get the answer, but it would take me just a little bit longer. Now, someone with low IQ, they just couldn't get it. It wasn't there. It wasn't a possibility to get it. And because the test wasn't designed to say, okay, well, what's the time delay? And I remember when the testers were doing it, they were like, this is really kind of interesting that you can actually get the right answer, but it took you longer because you had to process it more. And that seems to be correlated with some of the things they discovered in the dyslectic advantage. It's sort of a different layer of processing, like more processing going on. And that's slowing you down, and therefore you're getting low scores in certain areas. So there's a lot to be known about when we say there's a certain behavior, what we see, and in this case I was comparing this to transgender, right? Saying that, yes, we see a symptom, but we really need to understand the cause of that symptom. We can't just assume that this person knows what's best for them, or that some outsider knows what's best for them. And I had to learn for myself that not everyone really understood what was going on for me. There isn't a generic answer. Labeling someone with a learning disability doesn't describe the problem. It doesn't describe what's going on physiologically. So gender dysphoria, whatever you want to call the sensation that you feel like you're the wrong gender, it should still be an open question. It should be it shouldn't be stigmatized. You should be able to openly discuss your feelings, and you should have support as a mental illness, or a mental, whatever you want to call it. And this is where the stigmatization of mental illness comes into the play. Or that is that to be called, to say, hey, you have a mental illness, or a mental disability, or a mental abnormal mental characteristic. Okay, because if we look at the majority of people do not have, I'm going to call it gender dysphobia, just to be nasty. Now, is it nasty though? I think it's a good word, dysphobia. You don't feel like you're in the right person. But is it wrong to want to know what's happening underneath, what's the root cause of these sensations, and why do you think changing your gender feels like the right thing to do? How does this come about? I mean, there are many mental events in our lives that, what I was thinking was phantom limb syndrome. Would we, someone says, it's not my hand, would we cut it off? Because clearly we look at it and say, that's his hand. It's not my hand. I don't like, no, it's not phantom hand. It's alien hand syndrome, right? We know this is not my hand. They refuse to accept the fact. I mean, if you let them, they would probably chop off this arm, right? It's not mine. Get it off me. Get it off me. I mean, that's just a freaky thing to do. So we know these mental type of perspectives exist, and people can be very rational in and of themselves, but in a very narrow band. They're not capable of understanding that. And why would we give up on helping people because we're afraid of the political fallout? We're afraid of this. I really hope people really think about that a lot in terms of the coming years. Just don't be afraid to ask the question, what if it's something else? What if we're making a mistake here? Maybe we're not. Maybe it's okay. But it's okay to ask, maybe we're making a mistake. Maybe we're not doing the right thing. And that's what I think is really important to do. Anyways, thanks for watching the 3rd episode of The Catalyzer. I'm going to take a break tomorrow. I will see you Thursday with another episode. You never know exactly what time I'm going to do this. I just wanted to get this out of the way. If I can do it at 9:30, I like it better. Anyways, until next time, thanks for watching. Bye.